I'm Dylan Foley, and welcome to the All Is Motion podcast, looking at the bigger picture of events in Irish history. This is Anarchist Syndicalism and James Connolly and the Sligo Dock Strike. Chapter 1, Strike. The story began the year before, in 1912, when after a short strike, the workers had succeeded in organising labour on the docks under the new ITGWU union. Walter Carpenter, an ITGWU organiser, had come to Sligo to organise the union in 1911, and the local representative, John Lynch, was a member of both the Sailors' Union and the ITGWU. This union, the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, or ITGWU, had been founded by James Larkin in 1909. This new type of union was successful in organising the unskilled and casual labourers that had not before this been represented by the craft unions. They made up the vast majority of the town's workers and lived and worked in appalling conditions. Sligo had rates of TB double the national average, the worst in the country at that time, which was saying something in those days. Housing was without sanitation or clean water and was in many cases exposed to runoff from slaughterhouses, graveyards, manure piles and tanneries. The main employer on the docks, Arthur Jackson, of the Sligo Steam Navigation Company, a company founded by W. B. Yeats' grandfather, William Pollexfen, was determined to break the newly organised workers. Jackson was a veteran union breaker and had successfully prevented them organising since the 1880s, and was determined to win this time also. So when on March 8, 1913, the seamen of the SS Sligo demanded more wages, he saw his opportunity to break the new union, and so, refusing their demands, proceeded to lock them out. Basically, they were fired while the owners tried to source alternative labour. The sailors were joined by deckhands and firemen in the strike. Several of the sailors were imprisoned for abandoning their posts. Now we see what Jackson was so afraid of: the sympathetic or general strike, in which workers across industries struck in sympathy with those in other trades. This was the technique of the ITGWU. Hence the strike now spread to the docks as the dockers joined them also. Jackson then locked out all the unionised workers and sent his stevedores to recruit strike-breaking labour from Liverpool. But the arrival of this so-called scab labour only heightened the tensions as they tried to break the picket lines. Fighting erupted and a man named Patrick Dunbar was struck and killed in the fracas. The Sligo Champion reported that things have now assumed an aspect which grossly threatens the commercial prosperity of the port and the town generally. Quite whose prosperity was threatened, it didn't say. By the 22nd, the firm's carters had ceased work also, and Jackson had to send his office clerks to man the horses. More police and army were brought into the town, and now rioting erupted, and shops and property of several firms were attacked. Shops were boycotted, and all non-union labour was now picketed. Countess Markiewicz's brother, Jocelyn Gorbooth, shut his factory in the market yard area. That goods could not be moved to and from it was the official story, but it's likely he also locked out the 80 women workers, as the employers tried to maximise the pressure on the union men. The workers across the whole town now had to face down the hostility of the church, the police, the army, the GAA and Sinn Féin, as the strike and lockout continued into May. Perhaps surprisingly, and for reasons that will hopefully become clear later, they also had to go against the established unions, which opposed the methods of the ITGWU and advocated a less radical approach. The standoff rumbled on through the summer, with talk seemingly getting nowhere until quite suddenly on the 5th of May, Jackson and the other employers came to terms, the most important being that the ITGWU was now recognised as legitimate representative of the workers. The Irish Transport Union had won a complete victory, the RIC County Inspector reported to Dublin Castle, the centre of British power in Ireland. By January 1914, it was quoted, "The majority of the newly elected members were put forward by the Trades Council and the local branch of the Transport Union so that the council is now principally composed of Labour representatives, said the Sligo champion. After much bitterness, fighting, and even the death of a striker, they had won. But more importantly, they had implanted socialist ideas and action into Sligo town's culture, something the town was to pay a heavy price for in later years when the Free State came into being. But for now, the workers, though with a long way to go, had achieved something quite remarkable. This victory was regarded as a very important achievement of the ITGWU by Jim Larkin and James Connolly. Here was vindication that the approach of the ITGWU was correct. Even as the Sligo strikes were ending in favour of the workers, the biggest battle in Irish labour history was already beginning in Dublin. James Connolly and Jim Larkin and the whole union movement felt encouraged by the result in Sligo and hoped to replicate the success of the bigger arena of Dublin. Sligo's story was part of a wave of strikes, lockouts and agitation that spread throughout the industrial societies of the world between 1910 and 1914. The era was named the Great Unrest in Britain, great because of the ferocity of the confrontation and the violence used by the state and strikers as the conflict unfolded. This was a different form of organised resistance than people like Arthur Jackson had encountered before in the previous century, consisting as it did in the general strike. In Ireland, it became disparagingly known to its enemies as Larkinism, after the founder of the ITGWU, Jim Larkin. As conservative nationalists like Sinn Féin President Arthur Griffith said, the consequences of Larkinism are workless fathers, mourning mothers, hungry children and broken homes. Not the capitalist, but the policy of Larkin has raised the price of food until the poorest in Dublin are in a state of semi-famine. The curses of women are being poured on this man's head. But Larkinism was merely a euphemism to mask a worldwide movement that was really called Syndicalism.